You've had this argument before. Not this exact one, but this shape of one, where you both remember it differently. You're certain of what was said, the exact words, the exact tone. You can picture the moment clearly where you were standing, what they were wearing, how it felt when it happened. And they're equally certain of a completely different version, completely unshakably sure that it happened the way they remember it. So, one of you is lying, except what if neither of you is? What if both versions feel that real, that vivid, that certain because memory doesn't work the way you think it does? Here's what almost nobody tells you. Your memory isn't a recording. It never was. Every time you remember something, you're not pressing play on a file that's been sitting there unchanged since the moment it happened. You're rebuilding it from pieces. And some of those pieces, quietly, invisibly, without your awareness or consent, have been replaced. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how that happens, and you'll never be quite as certain about your most certain memories again. Before we get into the science, one thing worth saying up front. This isn't about doubting everything you've ever experienced. It's not about deciding that your memories are worthless, or that you can never trust your own account of events, or that every argument you've ever been certain about was somehow your fault. It's about understanding what memory actually is so you can use it more accurately, rather than treating it as something it was never designed to be. Because here's the thing, memory isn't a flaw in the human system. It's a feature, an extraordinarily efficient one. Your brain doesn't store everything. It couldn't. The energy cost would be unsustainable. Instead, it stores the essentials and reconstructs the rest on demand, filling gaps with what's most plausible given everything else it knows. That system works brilliantly for most of what you need memory to do. The problem is that most plausible given everything else you know isn't the same as exactly what happened. And that gap between the reconstruction and the original is where things get interesting. If you watched our last video on gaslighting, you'll remember that one of the reasons it's so effective is that your memory was already uncertain before anyone started working on it. This video is about that uncertainty. Not what someone does to your memory from the outside, what your own brain does to it from the inside. In 1974, a psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus ran a simple experiment. She showed participants a short film of a car accident. Afterward, she asked them questions about what they'd seen. For some participants, the question was, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? For others, the question was, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? One word difference. The participants who heard smashed estimated the cars were going significantly faster than those who heard hit. That alone is interesting. But here's the part that changes everything. A week later, Loftus brought the participants back and asked them another question. Did you see any broken glass in the film? There was no broken glass in the film. None. It hadn't been there. But participants who'd been asked about cars that smashed were significantly more likely to report seeing broken glass that didn't exist. The word in the question hadn't just changed their speed estimate. It had edited their memory of the event itself. This is the misinformation effect. When you encounter information after an experience, a question, a comment, a conversation, something you read, that information doesn't just sit alongside your memory of the original event. It gets woven into it. It becomes part of the reconstruction. And the next time you access that memory, the edited version is what comes out. Without any sense that editing has occurred, without any feeling of uncertainty, with the same vivid, confident, felt sense of, I remember this, that accompanied the original. Here's why this happens. Every time you access a memory, you're not retrieving a fixed file. You're reconstructing it from fragments, sensory details, emotional impressions, contextual cues, and, crucially, everything you've learned since the original event. The reconstruction process is influenced by your current emotional state, by what you now believe about the people involved, by what you've been told about the event by others, by how many times you've told the story and how the telling has shaped it. Each reconstruction is slightly different from the last, and each one gets stored as the new version. So the memory you have right now of something that happened 5 years ago isn't the memory of the original event. It's the memory of the last time you remembered it, which was itself the memory of the time before that, which was already a reconstruction. There is no original file. There is only the current version, which is the product of every reconstruction that has happened since. If the car crash study made you slightly uncomfortable, this one will go further. In the 1990s, Elizabeth Loftus and her colleagues ran a series of experiments to answer a more disturbing question. Not can existing memories be altered by subsequent information, but can entirely new memories, memories of events that never happened, be implanted in an otherwise healthy, intelligent adult? The answer, it turns out, is yes. Here's how one version of the experiment worked. Participants were given a booklet containing 4 short narratives about childhood events. They were told the narratives had been provided by their family members, people who actually knew them and actually remembered these things happening. 3 of the narratives were real, genuine childhood memories supplied by family. The 4th was fabricated, entirely invented by the researchers. It described being lost in a shopping mall as a child, separated from family, frightened, eventually found by an elderly stranger, and reunited with their parents. It never happened. Participants were asked to read all 4 narratives and try to remember as much as they could about each event. They were interviewed multiple times over several weeks. By the end of this study, roughly 25% of participants had developed a memory of being lost in the mall. Not just acknowledged the story, developed a memory. They described details the researchers hadn't provided. The color of the stranger's jacket, what the mall looked like, how they felt. They elaborated. They added texture. They built a vivid, emotionally resonant account of something that had never occurred, and they were confident. Not uncertain. Not, I sort of think, maybe. Confident in exactly the way you're confident about things you genuinely remember. Some participants, when debriefed and told the mall event had been fabricated, refused to believe it. "No," one participant said. "I remember it. It happened." Take a moment with that. Because what the Lost in the Mall experiment demonstrates isn't just that memory can be altered. It's that the feeling of remembering that vivid, certain, emotionally present sense of, "I was there, I know this happened," is not reliable evidence that the thing you're remembering actually occurred. The feeling and the fact are 2 separate things, and your brain produces the feeling whether or not the fact is there. This is the section worth pausing on before we move to where this shows up in your own life. Because the implications aren't theoretical. They're in every argument you've been certain about, every version of the past you've held on to, every story you tell about who you are and what happened to you. Let's make this concrete. First, in your relationships. You and someone you care about have a disagreement. A specific conversation is at the center of it. You both remember it. You're both certain, and you remember completely different things. This is one of the most common sources of genuine, irresolvable conflict in close relationships, and almost nobody understands what's actually happening when it occurs. What's happening is this. Memory encoding is heavily influenced by emotional state. When you're anxious, the brain prioritizes threat-relevant details and drops others. When you're hurt, the emotional experience of being hurt gets encoded strongly, and the specific words that caused it get reconstructed around that emotional core rather than stored verbatim. So, 2 people in the same conversation with different emotional states, different histories, different threat detection patterns will encode genuinely different versions of what happened. Neither version is a lie. Neither version is the objective record. Both are reconstructions, shaped by the emotional and cognitive state of the person doing the remembering. And then, every time the disagreement is revisited, every time the story gets told again, rehearsed again, argued again, each retelling slightly reinforces and slightly alters the version already stored. By the time you're certain, you've remembered it many times. And each remembering has drifted slightly further from whatever actually happened. This doesn't mean the person who hurt you didn't hurt you. It doesn't mean your emotional experience wasn't real. It means the specific reconstruction you're holding onto as evidence may be less reliable than it feels. Second, in how you see yourself. Your memory of your own past is not neutral. It is curated, not deliberately, not dishonestly, but consistently in the direction of whatever you currently believe about yourself. If you currently believe you're someone who always fails at a certain kind of thing, your memory will supply you with the greatest hits collection of the times that happened. The times it didn't happen will be harder to access, less vivid, less emotionally present. If you currently believe you were treated unfairly in a past relationship, your memory of that relationship will gradually shift toward confirming that belief, not because you're lying to yourself, but because reconstruction is influenced by current belief, and current belief shapes which fragments get assembled and which get left out. This connects directly to confirmation bias from 2 videos ago. Your memory isn't just influenced by what you believe in the moment of remembering. Over time, repeated reconstruction in the direction of a current belief can make the past genuinely look different than it did with no sense that anything has changed. Let's see a third example in the legal system. This one has stakes that go beyond the personal. Eyewitness testimony is among the most compelling evidence a jury can hear. A person looks at the jury, speaks with conviction, and says, "I saw this. I was there. I'm certain." And they are certain. The research is equally certain that eyewitness testimony is wrong at rates that should make everyone deeply uncomfortable. The Innocence Project, an organization that uses DNA evidence to exonerate wrongfully convicted people, has found that in more than 70% of wrongful conviction cases overturned by DNA, eyewitness misidentification was a contributing factor. Not lying witnesses, certain ones. People who saw something encoded it under stress, had it influenced by subsequent information, questions from police, conversations with other witnesses, media coverage, and then testified to a reconstruction they experienced as a memory. The confidence isn't evidence. It never was. So where does this leave you? The goal here isn't to make you distrust everything you've ever remembered. That's not useful and it's not accurate. Memory is right far more often than it's wrong, and functioning in the world requires trusting it enough to act. The goal is calibration, knowing when to trust it fully, knowing when to hold it a little more loosely, knowing the specific conditions under which it's most likely to have drifted from what actually happened. 3 things that actually help. Write things down as close to the event as possible. Not as a legal record, not because you expect to be contradicted, simply as a practice of capturing your perception before reconstruction has had a chance to work on it. The gap between the moment something happens and the moment you first remember it is where the most significant drift occurs. A written record created in that gap, what was said, what was agreed, how you felt in the moment before anyone else's account had a chance to influence yours, gives you access to an earlier version of the memory than any subsequent reconstruction can provide. This isn't about distrust. It's about giving yourself a reference point that exists independently of however many times you've remembered and retold the story since. 2. Treat your most certain memories as hypotheses, not facts, when the stakes are high. Day to day, for ordinary purposes, trust your memory. It's good enough for most of what you need, but in high-stakes situations, a conflict where a specific detail matters, a decision based on how you remember something happening, a judgment about another person based on your reconstruction of past events, holds the certainty a little more lightly. Ask yourself, how many times have I remembered this? How emotionally activated was I when it was encoded? Has my current belief about this person or situation shaped how I'm reconstructing it right now? You don't need to answer those questions perfectly. You just need to ask them, because the feeling of certainty is automatic. The questioning isn't. 3rd, when 2 people remember the same event differently, start with the assumption that both reconstructions are honest. This one is the most practically useful in relationships. The default assumption most people bring to a memory conflict is one of us is right and one of us is misremembering, or one of us is lying. The more accurate assumption, given everything we now know, is both of us are working from reconstructions that have been shaped by our emotional states, our current beliefs, and how many times we've each told this story to ourselves. That doesn't make every disagreement unresolvable. It means the argument about whose memory is correct is almost always the wrong argument. The more useful question isn't what actually happened, which neither of you can access with certainty. It's what do we each need given how we each experienced it? That's a question memory can't answer, but it's the one that actually moves things forward. So here's what this actually means. You are not a reliable narrator of your own past. Neither is anyone else. Not because people are dishonest, not because memory is broken, but because memory was never designed to be a recording, it was designed to be useful. And useful, in the way your brain defines it, means reconstructed, updated, and shaped by everything you currently know and feel and believe. That is an extraordinary system. It's also one worth understanding clearly, so you stop using certainty as proof and start using it as a starting point. The argument where you're both certain, neither of you is lying, both of you are remembering, and remembering, it turns out, is something entirely different from knowing. If this shifted something for you, drop one word in the comments. The word that best describes what this video changed about how you think about your own memory. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want to keep going, because next week we're staying with something most people are completely certain about: themselves. Specifically, the people who are most certain they're fine, that they don't need much, that keeping everyone else comfortable is just who they are. Those people burn out faster than almost anyone else, and most of them never see it coming. Next week, why people pleasers burn out faster than anyone else, and what's actually underneath the need to keep everyone happy. See you then.